Welcome everyone to Globalizing the DAM Function, a deep look at the explosion of working as one when the DAM, staff, and user base are truly global. Lisa Grimm and James Feltham of Novartis. If you're looking for on-demand content processes and video workflow with Teresa Regli and the Peloton Interactive, please head back to the agenda and click on track 2. And for one of my favorites, running a small but mighty DAM team, a day in the life of a senior DAM manager with the Real Story Group and Amazon Studios, click on track 3. Please don't forget to type your questions in the Q&A box for our session or any of the others you might attend. Lisa has been directing DAM taxonomy and content programs here in the US and in Europe since the May 1990s. She's worked both in the public and private sector side. One of the things I have fun knowing about Lisa is that she can occasionally be found complaining about missing or terrible metadata on Twitter. And she occasionally has a passing interest to write about beer history for anyone who will pay her. James, we had such a good time doing that session with Teresa when you were the DAM manager at the Art Fund. And I'm sure that Lisa has more than welcomed you to her team where you joined in 2020. And on that note, let me turn this over to you. I'll be looking everybody for the Q&A. So type them in and over to you, Lisa and James.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure to be back speaking with Henry Stewart. Just to do a little bit of level setting, we're not going to give you any sort of inside secrets into some of the things we do together at Novartis, but I think we will give you a sense of what it means to really work at this very global, very, very large scale. But again, I'm hoping to catch up on the other sessions as well later, especially the Peloton ones, since I think I'm on my 146-week streak, something like that. But with that said, I'll go ahead and dive into our slides. So first, just a little bit about me. So as David said, I'm at Novartis now. We, together with James and the people we will speak a little bit about, our sort of motley crew, we have a worldwide DAM solution with a lot of different people involved, many, many cooks in the kitchen, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. We'll speak about a little bit more. But I've also done, as David mentioned, DAM and that sort of broader enterprise content a little bit of everywhere in the library world, at Amazon, so also hope their session is going well. Again, in museums, libraries, archives, academia, all that good stuff. And as you can see, I am also the co-host of a beer podcast, the Beer Ladies podcast. I get a lot of questions about that. Do feel free to follow up after. We will hop into the lounge, so more than happy to share that. Don't have a drink in front of me right now, but maybe another time. And so let me then hand over to my stalwart colleague, James.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, James Feltham. I've had the pleasure to work with Lisa for the past 12 months at Novartis, having moved from a slightly smaller organization at the Art Fund, where I think we had about 75 to 80 people working, to Novartis, where I think we have 128,000 people. So it was a slight change in direction. As I say, previously worked for Art Fund, but started off my life very much in the media world, working at the BBC, ITV, in my music. And then was lucky enough also to work for 2 years in Los Angeles for Fox Broadcasting until getting back to the UK and landing this great job with Lisa.
We like it to be great, right? We try. So I think the biggest thing, we try hard. The biggest thing is it's really, really all about scale for us. There's, I think, with the sort of great scale comes great responsibility. But I think, as I was thinking about this, and like James, I've been somewhere much, much, much smaller. I've been a lone arranger myself. I've been very much in the shoes of those people who are maybe an archivist at an underfunded institution trying to digitize a few things to get into your DAM. But again, there's some flexibility there. You can often, get good at wearing many hats. Those medium and large size organizations often have very, very big silos. And we have a lot of these additional resources, but sometimes just the complexity of it can be certainly a big challenge. And everyone is looking at different things, is looking at the same things in very, very, very different ways. And I know, James, if you want to sort of weigh in with some of the things that maybe surprised you coming from a small organization into something that is the the sort of behemoth of Novartis and just trying to get DAM done, a few observations.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things for me was the global side of things, where you're trying to put out an enterprise model, a globally accepted DAM model, but you're dealing with the US, with France, with Germany, with the UK, with Ireland, who have all different current ways of working, and we're trying to put something across there which is globally acceptable. That's from the taxonomy through to ways of working, through to workflows. It was much more complex than I was thinking it was going to be.
All of us.
And I think, I always look at sort of the where we are as the working for Novartis is a pleasure cruiser, whereas working at Outfund was more of as a pleasure rowboat. And the cruiser, it has more staff. It's very well led, thankfully, by Lisa, but it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to change direction. And it can be more difficult to stop or maneuver than when you're a lone ranger, where you have a bit more freedom to do as you need to or as you want to. There are very much pros and cons for both sides of it. Absolutely. So not be careful what you wish for, but be careful what you don't wish for, I think is my case. Because I mean, the team we have is amazing, but it is a complex team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add on to that a little bit more too, there's that global element, and that's even, and again, this is not giving away state secrets, that's even where we essentially only operate in English. But even though we are an English only at the moment organization, just the level of complexity around, things like country codes, just things that should be very straightforward can be very, very, very big decisions, even though they seem relatively small. But like you're saying, James, that course correction can be difficult if something starts to go awry. And so it's definitely something where we really need to we do need to be kind of rowing in that same direction. And I think there's a lot of education that we have to do on a daily basis, because people don't necessarily know what it is we do or why or how it helps them. So there's a lot there under the hood. But I do want to speak a little bit more about that broader team, because, and again, this is not for me the first time working in an organization quite this size, but I know when I first came into something that was similar, it was a real learning curve to think, oh, I'm doing the DAM stuff, but there are all these other people involved who can help me, but who sometimes their good intentions almost get in the way of trying to help. So there's a lot of educating people within your own team, and we have kind of our core team, but then there are all of these other people involved, and trying to wrangle all of them is a huge part of the job that we both do. And we can speak a little bit about the differences between what I do, where I'm trying to sort of run interference with the senior leadership and try to get funding for things, sort of get funding for some of these people's roles to exist, that kind of thing. But then it's a question too of how can we best deploy them, and how can we set them up for success to really help us, and how do we make sure that all these sort of ancillary things fit together. But I think it's definitely kind of a shock to the system if you've come from a relatively small DAM team where maybe it's just you and sort of one other person in the entire organization who touched this at all. But I know for us it's a lot of meetings with a lot of different people who have very, very, very different needs. So James, I think I'd love to hear your perspective too, what it's like you're sort of at the coalface, which is even trickier in many ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other side of it is that when you have, especially in the current climate, where you need to get the core team all in the same room at the same time, and from that you need to get decisions made. But they're coming from all different parts of thought and parts of the organisation. So decision making can be lengthy at times. Done absolutely for the right reasons, because they're not rushed into, they're thought about, but people have opinions. But it can be difficult to get the people together at times in the right room at the right time, because they're all so busy to get these decisions made. But it is, from what coming to the larger team, we're talking with, obviously there's the IT side of it, but there's the compliance side, there's the approval side, there's so many different parts to the wheel in an organisation this side. And trying to get even when we do taxonomy updates, there's a whole process. It's not quite as quick and simple as one would think. We're getting better at it, and it's getting quicker, but it's still what I think is a laborious and slow process to get a taxonomy update into our system. But that's the way it is. It needs to go through approval processes and compliance processes. So that's what it is. And I think, again, Lisa, when we look at the UX, the DAM is pretty flexible, but we have to make sure that it's flexible for all of our users and not a select few, not something that we want, but something that all of our users want. So that's, again, is something that is can be a little bit time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, just to call out that the number of different teams involved into your broader team is really, it can be a little bit of a surprise when you start to enumerate the number of different people you meet with on a daily basis who all have some role to play here. And you have to think about, again, what is it that they need? What do I need to tell them to help us? Training, again, is a good example where, are we just training new users? How often do we change that training? Does it happen every time we have a new release, or does it happen only with big releases? There's a lot of these things that some of them are kind of governance decisions, but then others are really kind of almost not the whim, but kind of at least at the discretion of some of those other teams and their bandwidth. So things that, you need a lot of things to go out at once, maybe when you have a release, but is the training ready, or are your customers ready? And it can be a very big sort of knock-on effect when you sort of make a small decision up here. There's kind of a butterfly effect that's really ripples through the whole organization. And again, it's a lot of complexity to manage. And I think the other thing that is a big difference from working in a relatively small organization to working in a big global DAM team like ours is we also spend a lot of time, or we might be me, James, feel free to weigh in here, spend a lot of time creating slide decks and just talking through things that seem pretty straightforward to us, but you need to really, really bring people along that journey, whether it's those sort of senior stakeholders or, potentially onboarding new teams. There is a lot of, what in the library world or the archival world might be outreach. We do a lot of that, but it's higher stakes almost, if you like. And I don't know, James, if you have any reflections on that piece.
Yeah, I think I'm lucky in that I don't create too many of these presentations, but I get shown a lot of them.
Yes.
coming from all parts of the organisation, and all of these need to be taken into account when you're looking at making changes or alterations or some such. It comes from all sides. I think it's fair to say, Lisa.
Yes, it comes from all sides. That's a really, really good way to think about it. And it seems like the number of sides is always expanding to a certain extent. But of course, this all comes back to governance. There's governance for everything we do. But again, sometimes the governance needs governance. It needs to evolve. And as we, maybe onboard a new market, do we have a different way we need to work with them? Or if, again, there's a change to maybe the data model, do we need to change the way we think about that? Again, some of these things that seem relatively small tend to grow legs relatively quickly. But again, that governance, is it part of the core team? Is it part of the extended team? Where does it really fit? I mean, there are so many different people involved, some of them, temporary, some of them permanent. Where are they even? And I think it's a good sort of exercise, I think, to try to go through, and we've been doing this recently, again, not giving away state secrets, but trying to think about how do we want to expand our team? What are those roles that we see as maybe something that's temporary as we try to roll out either, a new capability or a new feature, new functionality? Maybe that's something that someone does for 6 to 12 months as they help us get there. Or is that something where we see that as continuing to evolve? Does it need its own product owner kind of within our broader team? Is that something, does it matter where they're located? And again, with COVID, we're all working remotely. But again, there's still this sort of onshore, offshore difference. Especially the big companies like to save money. So those are certainly conversations you have to have. And, you really have to think about too, when you're talking global, do you need someone who understands DAM? Do you need someone who understands how they can really get their particular sort of local flavor into your data model, or at least into sort of a vocabulary that your users will understand? And I think one of the big things that we're seeing more and more, not just with us, but I think across this field, and I think, again, David's been so instrumental in kind of helping this happen, is what does career progression look like for people on this team? There are so many different ways you could go in this, whether it's purely being a DAM expert. And I say purely, I know that involves a whole lot of things that we'll speak a little bit more of in a moment. But maybe someone starts to get into this and then they start to say, wow, I'm really good at this project management. We're doing so much of it. Or product management, or again, localization, or training, change, and comms. There are all of these different things that we need to be involved in day to day, and all of these people's roles are important, but I think there's a real opportunity there for people to kind of test and learn what they're doing and try to say, oh, I've never thought about going in this direction, but now that I've really played in this space, I feel like I'm perhaps becoming a subject matter expert in this, and I might start to move in that direction. So I think we may start to see that as DAM teams become part of these sort of broader kind of matrixed organizations. I do think people will really have sort of complementary skills exchange and start to just learn more from each other and grow in different directions. So that's one of my hopes, is that eventually this is really an area where people can really expand their knowledge and grow their careers, and not just kind of come in and say, oh, I'm tagging some things, which is all great and very important, but there's so much more within this field. And I think, again, James, over to you to add a little color. I think you've seen this wide spectrum of what we've got.
Yeah, I mean, again, from my side as well, I think it's developing now, but I think people are expecting a good DAM wherever they are now, which I think a while ago people didn't even know what a DAM was, and now they're expecting the DAM to be good and to be easy and to be functional, and so they can go in there, find what they want, and get out. And I think that's, again, for us, there's sides of making sure that the content is approved, different ways of getting content into the DAM. But also, I think, even over the past year, the differences that have come up, even with something like modular content, which is something that's come in as new to what we've been doing, and is now become a very, very major part of what we're looking at. And I think, again, it will take the side of some people that work for us have got a very special penchant for working with modular content. So I think there's a big development from the DAM side now into something like modular content as well. So that's, again, another sort of career progression from that side, which sort of comes up within what you're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the thing too. And it's sort of navigating some of those waters too, is, a lot of it especially, I think every organization is political to some extent or another, but especially in some of these big organizations, it's being able to sort of go through that and say, okay, what's popular this week? Almost, why are we doing X or Y? What do we prioritize that's really going to help, sort of make our customers happy at the end of the day? Because I think, James, you're absolutely right, is it's really become sort of the expectations are much, much higher than they were before. And again, with COVID, now that everyone's remote, they need the stuff. They need it now. They don't want to go searching for it. And that's fair enough. And it's how quickly can we keep evolving what we offer as a product? And again, that product is, you've got your base DAM, you've got the content in it, but you've also got services sitting underneath it potentially, especially if you're a kind of a big shop like ours. How does that continue to evolve? Are there things they do now versus things they're going to do later? And how do you kind of plan for those capabilities, or plan to kind of build that out as it goes, so that as you do more and more things, if people get stuck and need help, they've got someone who can help them. I think as we've seen, this kind of organization growing, there are so many different levels you need within it too, because I'm lucky because I can bring James to any meeting and with any kind of senior stakeholder no matter what, and he'll be great. But I can't necessarily bring a sort of junior content librarian who's working within our service team. They're not going to be kind of ready for that kind of onslaught, nor should they be. It's something you kind of work up to, but it's definitely something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, just sort of making sure people have that kind of career progression, but again, that they've got options. And we've got a lot of options people can go in, and directions they can go in. But at the end of the day, it comes back to, as well, how do you fund this? How do you tell your senior leadership, we really need this? And again, especially in large organizations, they don't necessarily like to hire new full-time staff. They like to say, let's get a consultant in to do X or Y. So I do spend a lot of my time trying to sort of put together decks and say, no, this is why this is a permanent capability, and we need a person who can grow in this role, et cetera, et cetera. So I do a lot of that, or try to do a lot of that sort of maneuvering, if you like. So it's an interesting thing, because I still feel like, even at my level, I still need to have all the taxonomy stuff in my head, and all of that sort of still knowing how to go in and actually tag things. But at the same time, the roles evolve into these very kind of multifaceted things, and I think, again, we need to just bring more people along for the ride on that. And I don't know, James, probably what you're doing now looks very different from what you thought you'd be doing when you when you first started just a year ago.
Absolutely, hugely. I think also on the side of it is that you've got to we change at such a quick rate. You know, we sort of we release. We're very agile the way we do things. We're releasing on sort of every 3 weeks. We put out something new to our product. So we not only have to train the trainers, we have to train the support team.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure the training is up to date and reflects the platform that we're aiming at. We've got much better with change management. That's something that has got better throughout. But then again, that's another part. We have a change management team. We have a support team. We have a services team. We have the breadth of it is huge. And again, this can slow things up to make sure that everybody's ready when things go out. But we try and make it as smooth and as fast as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing. Having all of these resources is wonderful, but sometimes it's a double-edged sword, and you just have to kind of work with what you're given on a particular day. Some days are tougher than others, just as in any organization. But having said that, I think that is the main bulk of what we wanted to share with you. But we are more than happy to answer questions, and we will be in the lounge after.
Well, thank you both. It's so interesting to hear the evolution of how on the road to where you are today, both in your careers as well as from a corporate point of view at Novartis and the internal evolution that's taken place there. We had an interesting question that I think you've already touched upon come in. When you move from a smaller centralized team into a larger global team, how would you prioritize your advice on welcoming new DAM users beyond just training? Career paths, sharing ownership, inspiring adoption. I think you both have commented on, but maybe within that particular focus.
That's a really interesting question, because I think it's something we would both say, in our current organization, we're not doing well enough, but we would like to keep improving. And I think because we are a sort of agile with a capital A organization, we do get the opportunity to sort of have retrospectives and say what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we improve. We do that as a sort of regular discipline, and we do sometimes look at whether it's onboarding new staff, new team members, or whether it's onboarding new users. I think we've really evolved what that looks like. I think, again, being totally candid, we can certainly do a much better job of onboarding new team members, because at the moment they sort of show up and they log into a computer, and we hope they get on with it. And they need to have much more of a kind of buddy system or something like that, so they're not just drinking from the fire hose for day one. But I don't know, James, do you want to talk a little bit about how we have kind of evolved that user experience in terms of kind of the outreach before they come online? I think that's been a real evolution.
Yeah, I mean, again, to start with, from my personal side, is that as soon as I joined Novartis, obviously I've never met Lisa. I've never met anybody I work with.
Never in person.
Which I'm sure a few people will be in the same boat. And I think you go into your first sort of team meetings and you're unsure of yourself. You're not quite sure. But I think the team we've got is very vocal.
Yes.
which is great. But it's also they expect you to be able to do what you are employed to do, and then once you've earned your stripes, then it just moves on at a rapid rate, which is great. But I think also, Lisa, what you're talking about is the way we're now onboarding new markets is that before they come on board to the DAM, I'm making sure that I will put aside some time to do some live demos with the markets, invite them all in, and show them what they're going to get when they get there. So it's not a shock. They don't get something and don't know how it works or what it is or how to get to what they're after. We're showing them ahead of time what it is, and I think this is a bit of a push from where we were. So somebody's aware of we want it to almost act like shopping on Amazon. We want it to be very, very simple. Once you've done it once, you know exactly where you're going and what you're after, and you can get there. But if you can't find the Amazon website in the first place, then you're not going to find what you're after. So we're going backwards a little bit and making sure that people know where they're going and know what they're going to do when they get there. And I think that's been one of our important changes.
Yeah, and we just need to make it a more scalable process, so it's not always just James having to go out and log in at an unreasonable time to do it. So again, hopefully we can eventually make that a little easier. But it's a really good question.
And I think both of what you've both been saying speaks to what Teresa commented on earlier, that this is a program management for a company, not just a project. And that's part
Absolutely.
of it's part of the endoskeleton. I mean, there's just and getting that across. And James, what you just said about new departments coming on can have such a nice intimacy with advocating for governance and for building that kind of knowledge about the program around the company. So when it's budget time, that people have started, that they can not only say how they use it, but they want more. And it was so nice to hear that when that happens. I'd also like to highlight something that both of you have commented on, and James, I think you said it quite thoughtfully, that DAM is part of talent management. The more that we're back in offices, the more that, and unemployment in our field is very, very low. And for someone to consider a job where there's not a well-functioning DAM, it starts to bleed off the best candidates. And that's going to happen more and more. It's very predictable. It follows other technology trends. And I think it's quite valuable to have HR know when they're doing recruiting that look at this team that's here. You know, you have a globally known DAM program. It's a point of pride. It's a point of pride to all of us who are attending the festival today to see the leadership that Lisa, you've inspired in pulling this together. And so I think if that can help to translate, all the better.
I hope so.
We had an interesting question come in. As the two of you look at a career path, were there any particular topics that you would recommend that you were really glad that you had that in your background, or that you wish you had in your background?
Oh, that's a great question. I can start with actually, I can do both. I'm, obviously very glad I went to library school and that I've got that there, because having the fundamentals of, things around, taxonomy, ontology, knowledge representation, all of those things are just, part and parcel. That's our foundation. If we get that wrong, and there's always going to be something evolving in it, that's huge. We need to be able to have that and to have that understanding of how to evolve those things and what that looks like. But I think what I wish I'd had, things that I've just learned on the job over, I would say especially over kind of the past 10 years, where exactly to Teresa's point earlier, this is very much moved from a project people did once and said, oh, we've done the thing now, it's there, to a program. And for us, it's really run as a product. So I'm the global product owner, and having that product ownership is, things that I've really learned on the job, both in my current role and in several previous roles, to really be thinking about, how do we groom the backlog? How do we run that? How do we build that roadmap? What does that look like from a sort of grooming perspective, from a comms perspective, all of those things. I've been really fortunate to be in a position where I could learn those things on the job, but if I'd had a little more sort of formal grounding in that, I don't think I needed to go to business school necessarily or anything like that, but it's a really useful toolkit. And I think the methodology doesn't matter as much, even though we are agile, but just to think about, how you own and develop a product, I think is really, really crucial. And especially when it comes to working with your vendors, and this applies to all DAM vendors, that's how they operate. So it's good to be able to speak that language when you're coming in and saying, hey, we would really like to be able to do X or Y. Is this in your roadmap? And do that comparison. And James, you've probably got a whole bunch of good stories along those lines.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm almost jealous that people are starting off in digital asset management, because when I started, I was in analog asset management, very much so, working in a photo library where we would get rolls of film, and you'd have to look at them on a light box and cut the frame out you wanted and print a label for a slide. And there's probably people in school who don't know what I'm talking about. And then type a card to say that slide number 33 is the Eiffel Tower in Paris. It's the same thing. It's a great grounding, because all you're doing is making something findable for a user. And I think now with DAM, one of the things I will take away is I didn't know anything about pharma when I started working in Novartis. Mm-hmm. I've been a lot in media, but I think you have the basic groundings of working in DAM. You can pretty much work in any part of any industry. Mm-hmm. You really can, as long as you are adaptable. You can work in. I've worked in travel, in art, in TV, in music, and now in pharma. So I think it's a great thing to have, because it's adaptable in so many different markets, so many different areas, and it's getting to the place where everybody's going to need to have a DAM. Every single person is going to have.
No, we're already there. Well,
Well, nearly.
it's the rear view mirror for that, James.